Hi, I'm Brad Burrow with Thinking Bigger Business Media. I'm here with Dan Stalp, Sandler Training. And today we're going to introduce our network to Sandler Training and Dan, your program. So thanks for joining us.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
I did want to say a couple things. You know, I was looking through your website here, and there's a lot of awards on there. So a couple of them that kind of sparked my attention here, 25 under 25.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool.
That's
it's
from the old Thinking Bigger days.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Unsung Hero Award.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. 40 under 40.
Yep. Just last year.
Yeah.
Wow. That was a long time ago.
Here I'm saying, yeah. It's like
I need to be 60 under 60 now.
I hear you. Kansas City Business Magazine Top Growth. A lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
You've been involved in the Kansas City business community a long time.
I have been. And when you do something, when you're here for like 28, 30 years, things start to add up. But yeah, it does seem like a lot now that you put it that way.
Can you start by just telling us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So Sandler Training is a sales coaching and training and professional development firm. And most of our clients are actually in the sales space because, for every sales manager you might have 7 to 10 salespeople. So we primarily work with salespeople, but we also work with their managers, and we also work with owners of companies. And that's through our training. Sandler is a proven method, and it started out in Baltimore, Maryland about 50 years ago and has grown throughout the world, really through franchises. So I own one here. And then, but what happens is it's kind of like a health club mentality. Our clients have up to 10 sessions a month that they have open access to. And they're an hour and a half at a time. And we don't expect them to hit everything, but by them coming in more, they start to actually master things instead of just learning things. And so that's really our goal, is for people to master, and then they also get unlimited coaching with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I was doing a little research on your background and found out that you've started 2 different companies from scratch.
I have.
So you're the perfect candidate or person to be a part of Thinking Bigger.
Okay.
Because we've all started our businesses from scratch, and it's
Sure.
like the pain and suffering, I should
Yeah,
say, that you go
it
through
can
to
even
start
be
a
misery.
business. Yeah. So you've done that.
Yeah.
So why did you choose to be an entrepreneur?
Well, it's funny. In 1993, it was by accident, and then in 2005, it was by choice.
By accident, huh?
Yeah, it was a choice. But so I was working for a company. Back then, I was in the insurance business, and so I was working for a company, and they had 2 divisions. They had a corporate-owned life insurance that they used to, for funding, and then they had a benefits division. I was in the benefits division. Well, in 1993, before Obamacare, there was almost Hillary Care. And so the owner got kind of scared about it, and he just decided he was going to go back to the corporate owned because he knew that's how he built the company. So he said, you guys, I'm going to shut this down, and you guys can either, go find jobs, or if you want to take what you've already gotten and run with it, I'll let you. So 4 of us decided to run with it. And at the time, I'm thinking, this is kind of risky because we had just had our first child. But I thought, you know what, when else am I going to get this chance? And I can always go back and get a sales job,
Yeah.
So I went ahead and did it, and I was part of that company for 12 years.
That's a good run.
Yeah. And in fact, I left that company to start over with Sandler.
So one of the things, so you've been in sales a long time. Sales has changed a lot. Can you talk about how it's changed? What's different? I know a lot's different today because of COVID, and I want to talk about that a little bit, but how has it evolved? The whole process is different, how we research is different, all those things.
Yeah. In some ways, it's not different, but it is different. So there's just timeless principles that were relevant 50 years ago, relevant 20 years ago, 10 years ago, a year ago, and now. But it's how we get in front of our customers and prospects, and also how much information they have before they meet us. It used to be they had to learn pretty much everything from you, but now you can Google anything, you can, there's YouTube videos, there's so much out there.
Yeah.
They're just more informed. But I'd say the main thing is, and of course the pandemic just really pushed this into the future, is there's not as much networking as there used to be. There's not, the phone still works, it just doesn't work as well as it used to.
Yeah.
People don't answer their phones, or you would think, I have a phone on me right now, I would answer it more, but I answer it less. So there's those types of things where it's more of a referral, someone, kind of putting in a good word for you is definitely more the way of the future now.
So do you think as a salesperson, that's something you need to be focused on more than ever, is how can I've done a great job for you, how can I how can I ask you to introduce me to more people?
Right, and that, and that's always been the case, but what makes it easier now is if you and I are connected on LinkedIn, I can go ahead and just peruse your LinkedIn connections and give you 5 to 7 names. You don't even have to think. You just have to respond. Like, like here's 5 to 7
I see
names.
you're connected to this person.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
And even just kind of, like I'd have 5 of them here. I'd say, now, who out of these 7 don't you know? And then we just cross those off because I'm not going to have you cold call for me.
Yeah.
And then it's like, those 2 people, and then we just talk about it, and then we decide that there's one of them that you said, you know what, I can introduce you to him or her, or, I can do it through an email, I can do it through a phone call, or I'm going to see him playing golf, whatever. So that's the part that's really sped up, is the ability to know who knows the people you want to meet.
LinkedIn has changed everything, hasn't it? I mean, it's amazing. My whole sales process is that I would try to find the right people, meet the right people, and you couldn't even find a name. With LinkedIn, you can go in and really find the person you want to speak to, research them, see who they're connected to. Hey, this guy, I know this guy. It's unbelievable.
Or they worked at a company 20 years ago that maybe you worked at 10 years ago, and you didn't even know that you had worked at the same company.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really pretty amazing because, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, but there's occasionally I'll post someone's name up, and we have 450 connections in common. I'm like, okay, how do we not know each other? They always say Kansas City is a big, small town, but it's just like 450.
Yeah.
And we've never met. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But how would you know that if it wasn't for LinkedIn?
So one of the questions I couldn't wait to ask you is cold calling. Used to be you'd cold call. You have a list and you'd work down that list, and probably still people are still doing that. But do you think cold calling is dead? Is it a lost art now?
It's not dead. In fact, I always say it's not dead unless you don't do it.
Yeah.
You can make it dead. But in some ways, it's almost like, people used to send cards, and now they don't do that anymore. And if you get a card, you're going to go, oh, wow, I got a card. How much mail do you get a day? I don't get much.
Yeah.
So but how many emails do you get? I get like 150, and I get like 3 pieces of mail, 2 pieces of mail.
Right.
So sometimes just doing the opposite of what people are doing. So in some ways, cold calling is kind of doing the opposite of what everybody else is doing. But what we say and how we say it is a little bit different. Everybody's, Roland did the sound bites.
Yeah.
And so, but I do train people on how to do that. In the beginning, when you start a new business, you don't have anything else going for you. I always say the only thing worse than not cold calling is doing nothing.
Yeah.
So I see cold calling as just a way to get some momentum, but not necessarily a long-term solution to prosperity.
Yeah. So another term I hear a lot these days is relationship selling. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that gets abused a little bit,
Does it?
because obviously you don't want to buy from someone who's repulsive or, that kind of thing. But I think people take the relationship selling piece too far. Like they think it's everything, and it's part of it. It's not everything. If I like you, but you have, a crappy product or service, I'm still not going to buy from you. Okay,
Right.
So you can't just say
Just because
relationships
you're a
everything.
good guy.
Yeah, just
I'm
because
gonna
you're a
buy
good
this
guy.
crappy service.
Yeah, I wish I had a quarter for every time I said that. Why should I talk to? Oh, he's a good guy. I go, don't say that anymore. It's
Yeah.
true, but you got to come up with something a little better than that.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, I think it's the people who do best in selling provide a safe environment, because then they are able to get more information so that they can qualify or disqualify them.
Yeah.
So having a good relationship helps with that safe environment.
So on the relationship selling side of things, we talked about it a little bit, but you mentioned earlier that maybe it makes a difference on the type of sale.
Yeah.
That makes more of a difference in certain types of sales than others.
Correct.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so let's say, for example, I'm buying scales, and I can get a Toledo scale from 3 different people. Then I'm probably going to pick the person who I have the best relationship with, because it's the same product. So that would be what we would call a commodity product, or a perceived commodity, where I think it's all the same. So then I might go with the person I like, but I'm still going to be really price conscious. But where it's not as important is when you get into the more complex sales, because obviously you don't want to be repulsive, like I said, but they're more about, do you have the solution that I need? And so we need to be able to understand them enough to have the right solution. There's a lot of people that are overprescribing, misprescribing all the time. They might have a good relationship, but they don't have the essence of what the real issue is. And so then it doesn't matter what your relationship is, you're not going to get that sale.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it is when people are in what I call a unique value quadrant. These are people that sell things that people don't typically have, and they don't perceive they need it. And so in that situation, it's more about them being able to ask really good questions rather than being their friend. And that's where I think a lot of people take the relationship selling too far, as they think, for you to buy from me, you have to be my friend, and that's just not true.
Yeah. Or
It's
because
more-
you're my friend, you're going to buy from me.
Well, and let's face it, every time I've gotten involved with a friend in terms of sales, we both left a little disappointed because they thought they're going to get this great deal because they're my friend, and I think they're going to be easy to sell because they're my friend, and we both leave disappointed. So if it was just that easy, it wouldn't be that, so yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Explain what makes Sandler different. I mean, we probably hit on that just a little bit,
Yeah.
but there are a lot of sales organizations out there.
There are.
I mean, probably thousands.
Yeah.
And then talk specifically about your approach to Sandler.
Sure. So in terms of what I would call a proven system, there are fewer proven systems than sales organizations out there, that provide sales training. And so we are one of many, but not one of thousands. So there's
Okay.
people out there that, are in their basement and, this worked for me, and so I'm going to go ahead and portray these principles, but there's nothing proven about it. And it's oftentimes not even necessarily transferable. So what's different, about Sandler and some of the others, Dale Carnegie's a proven system's been selling, is that they've been tested not only in, in my business, in my basement, not only in Kansas City, not only in the United States, even in other countries with different industries. And so if you've got something that can work in all those, that's more of a proven system than this is just something I like to do.
Different languages, different cultures.
Different languages,
it still
different
works.
cultures, it still works. Yeah, and we're not the only company, by the way, that can do that. But I just want to make that distinction because to the uninformed person, it's all the same. But then the other part of it is, someone say, well, what is the best system? Kind of like they're going to say, of course, Sandler. And I'm going to say, it may not be, because the best system is the one that you use.
Yeah.
So if Sandler's proven and another company's proven, but you're not willing to use Sandler, then it's not the best system. Just because I write a check and sign up for something doesn't mean it's going to happen. So the best system is the one that you use. And then the other part of that one is not only that you believe in the system, but that you're getting reinforced in the system.
Mm-hmm.
That's why diets fail and people don't stay in shape, is because they never really own it. They just kind of try it long enough, they kind of get it, and then they start to fade away. So one of the things that, and this isn't just our office, is that we work with people for years. Our average client stays about 4.5 years.
Is that right?
They see us 4 to 6 times a month. So if you're really going to modify behavior and change habits, you got to have reinforcement, and you got to do it long enough that it's not just something it's something you just automatically do.
Becomes second nature.
Second nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, you look at golf, for example. If I go up there and I'm thinking about keeping my arm straight and, I'm going to miss the ball, but if I just go up, adjust the ball, swing, I own it, assuming that so that's part of what we're trying to do, is just that you own it, you mastered it, and not just know it.
And that takes time.
Takes time. And that's just, in this world now where instant messaging and texting and everything's right now, there's just certain things you can't speed up.
Yeah. Can you give us like the elevator speech for Sandler? So if somebody new is watching this and they want to know what it is, what would you say to them?
Well, in terms of who would be interested in us, I would say it's executive level, because with some of the smaller companies, because they're still overseeing everything, and then the management, like sales management, VPs of sales, and then and I like to say the best salespeople. A lot of times, people, when they think of sales training, they want to send their problem children.
Yeah.
And the problem is they probably shouldn't have been hired, so then we're throwing good money after bad.
Yeah.
So we really want people that already have momentum and have a gap. So if they don't have a gap, we can only help them so much. So what I mean by that is they want to work fewer hours and make the same amount of money. They want to work the same hours and make more money. Or they want to work fewer hours and make more money. Or they want more time with their family. But if there's not a gap, they tend not to do as well in our training. So it's really people who are working hard but aren't being effective. Like they're getting used for their information, or their bids get shopped around, or their quotes get shopped around, or managers might say, gosh, my people are in their offices on their computer, but they're not on Zoom calls, they're not on phone calls, they're not on face-to-face calls, and I really don't know what they're doing. Or another group would be that they have a superior product and they get commoditized a lot. So they really have a hard time differentiating why their product is better for the consumer. They just talk about why it's better.
Yeah.
And the consumer can't assimilate what that means. So those would be people that would be good candidates for us.
So do you work with employers to help them identify some of those issues? I mean, there's probably a lot of small business owners out there that they know they have issues, but they don't necessarily know how to identify those issues,
Right.
or even look at a situation and say, here's the problem.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. You know, sometimes they know what to do, but they can't get it done. But more often than not, they just don't know what to do. I mean, if they did, they might have done something
Right.
about it already. So if I
Right.
don't know, I can't do unless I'm subconsciously competent. And then the other thing that happens too many times is the owner of the company just kind of naturally does it, but he or she has a really hard time transferring that once they start to add salespeople. And they're just kind of looking at them like, why don't you know this? Well, a lot of people don't know this.
That I've had that problem a lot,
Yeah.
you know, because I can get into a situation and understand pretty quickly what needs to happen, how it needs to happen, sell some creative ideas or whatever it is, and, you know, win a project. But
Right.
teaching somebody else to do that's been nearly impossible.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be you just do it because you've just done it, but it's like, you know, why do I do that? Or how do I transfer that? Or
Yeah.
I didn't even know I did that.
Right.
Yeah, there's that kind of stuff.
Yeah. COVID. So, you know, everything's changed. You
Yep.
know, even thinking bigger, we had to stop. And you know, now we're kind of coming out of this. Every business has changed in some ways.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, my wife is an accountant. She's still working from home a couple days a week.
Yep.
You know, what do you say to an organization that still has to sell, but they now have a new way they have to go about it?
Yeah. So one thing I like to say about COVID or anything that could be easily labeled as good or bad is just not to label it. It just is. You know, because if I label it bad, then I might not be creative in how I'm going to get through it. As opposed to if it just is, if it just is, that means there's things that are good and there's things that aren't so good. And frankly, COVID is a perfect example of that. You know, unfortunately, the news only wants to cover, you know, the people that are really struggling, but really about 70 to 80% of the companies, in terms of their revenues, weren't really affected. And in fact, there's a lot of them are doing better, but that doesn't sell. See, that wouldn't have been a good news story.
Yeah.
So the reality of it is,
Right.
it did change, but I mean, I've heard a lot of good things about, gosh, you know, for me to have had 4 sales meetings in a day pre-COVID would have been unheard of. There's no way I could have done all that, but I can do 5 on Zoom so
Yeah.
in some ways, you know, there's that ability to get more done because there's not all that traveling.
Right.
Another thing that I've witnessed a lot is, you know, like if you and I were sitting down and I gave you a proposal where you're looking through it and I'm having a hard time keeping us on the same page. Well, if I'm on a video conferencing, I have control of that. So I just go, okay, now we're going to go to page 3. I don't let you have it quite yet.
Yeah.
So I can kind of control, you know, are we all looking at the same thing? I can choose not to even show you the price page if it's not if I discover you're not qualified. It doesn't matter what it costs if it's not going to work. So
Yeah.
in some ways, it's allowed us to kind of tighten things up, but in other ways, it's been harder. You know, getting hold of people is harder. You know, because they're not in a centralized location
Yeah.
anymore. But what I found is executive level people were actually easier to get a hold of last year. Because they were at home and they weren't getting pawed at by all the stuff at the office. They had to give out their cell phone numbers if they wanted anybody to contact them, or it rang through. And
Yeah.
so a lot of people had a lot more success calling people they didn't know last year on a C level.
So I think I figured out the first video you need to do to help us as small businesses is how do we conduct a sales call on Zoom?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that seems like fairly simple, but there's probably some really good best practices to be thinking about.
Yeah, there's a lot of good best practices.
Yeah.
But it really, I would say a lot of people have really embraced it and they're looking at the advantages of it rather than, you know, there were a lot of people in the beginning that just said, yeah, I just don't think it's appropriate to prospect during this pandemic. And I said, it's interesting because I have some people that think it's inappropriate not to prospect during a pandemic.
But you
So
still want to eat, right?
Exactly. Well,
We
and
gotta survive.
People still need things.
Yeah,
So I'm not even giving you the chance to say no. I'd say that's more inappropriate.
yeah, yeah, I would agree. All right, so we're about finished.
Yep.
Advice for a small business. You know, we're coming out of the pandemic. You know, things have changed. Not everybody's situation is different. You know, what advice would you give, just in general, to small businesses from a sales and business development standpoint coming out of the pandemic?
Yeah, and this is not what anybody's going to want to hear, but it's the honest to God truth is they have to start tracking what they're doing, not just what they're getting. This is, because
Elaborate what you mean by
well,
that.
most people, I'm sure there are companies that don't do this, track their sales, which is
Yeah.
the outcome, right? And so when sales are up, they feel good. When sales are down, they feel bad. And it's just this, yo-yo effect. And sometimes owners and managers think they're being helpful and saying, oh, you didn't sell much last week. And the salesperson's like, seriously? Like, I know, tell me something I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but what they aren't telling them and what they're not getting from them is those key performance indicators. So what's interesting about key performance indicators is even though a lot of the outcomes changed last year, some of the KPIs didn't, like conversions from attempts to conversations, or conversations to meetings, or how many meetings they're having, or the average size of the quote, or their closing ratio. And so when you have those things, then when a pandemic hits, you can just see things starting to shift, but you can go right to the cause and not just that my sales are down. My sales were down too for 3 months. I had no new business coming in. But I was still prospecting, and I could see that my conversions to conversations actually went up. I was still having appointments. People were just scared to buy anything, but they were still meeting. They were still talking to people. So those KPIs really allow a company to be more, more consistent about things. Like they don't just like floor it because they haven't sold anything for a while, and then they don't take their foot off the gas because they just sold a big one, because that's exhausting. And it's frankly not very helpful to the salespeople. So even if it's just an owner doing chief cook and bottle washer, they need to be tracking what they're doing and what it's getting them to be effective.
Does your system help them do that?
Yeah,
That's always been a challenge for me.
Yeah, I mean, we call it the cookbook.
Yeah.
So, you and I could have the exact same goal, but our cookbook be very different.
Yeah.
Because let's pretend you're more effective than me. You could get there doing half the behavior that I have to do. But it would actually tell us what the behavior is, like how much. And when people don't know their behavior, they tend not to do enough.
Yeah.
They just don't know.
I was for years what I would call a sole proprietor.
Yeah.
And so my sales cycle would go, I'd go sell something, and then I'd do the video and I'd produce it, and then I'd go down,
Yeah.
and then I'd go out and I'd prospect and I'd sell something. So I
That's
was
exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now if you knew that to be consistent, you still needed 2 new a day, because what happens is with sole proprietor, you sell it and then you also have to fulfill it, right?
Right.
But people say, I don't have time. And I'm like, well, I'd say you don't have time not to, because
Yes.
you're going to have another problem in about 2 months or another 30 days when you finally get done with this, and now you have nothing in your pipeline.
For some reason, banks don't like that either. Like when your sales go like
Spouses
that.
don't either.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I really appreciate it. I
Yeah,
know
you
that
bet.
we're looking forward to some great content coming,
Absolutely.
and feel free to keep listening in. And I know that Dan's going to have a lot of content for small businesses, which is going to be great. I'm going to be listening because I need to learn some of these things
We
myself.
all can learn.
You could teach us how to be disciplined, maybe, huh?
Yeah.
It's a do this every day, right? It's
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Dan, how would somebody get a hold of you if they wanted to engage?
Yeah, I mean, you can just call me at 913-451-1760. You can email me at dstalp@sandler.com, or I'm the only Dan Stalp on LinkedIn. So it's STALP. So if you want to check that out and send me an invite, we can go that route too, or in message.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we will see you next time.